Good afternoon and welcome. This is the Tuesday, January 24th, 2017 City Council work session. Before we begin with the agenda items, Nick Glue from Medco would like to introduce someone.
Just real quickly, Council and City staff, we have a new member of our Medco team that I just wanted to introduce to you. This is Emily Russ. She is our new business engagement specialist, which basically means she handles both kind of internal and external marketing efforts for our organization. So we're excited to have her on our team. She started just last week. We stole her away from junior achievement here in the Cedar Rapids area. She's already been actively involved in our community as a current member of the Marion Chamber's Leadership in Action program, and we're excited to have her on our team as she works to market our community to folks that we hope will join us. So I just wanted you to be able to make that connection, Emily Russ. So.
Thank you. Welcome, Emily.
Welcome.
Okay, we have a presentation.
Yes, Your Honor. Jennifer Decker is here with Hogan and Hansen to give you a short, brief presentation on our audit report. You should have all received a hard copy of that report, I believe, and there's also an electronic copy in your council packets. Yep. So if you didn't get one, let me know, but you should have one out there. So otherwise, Jennifer.
I didn't get a hard copy. Electronic.
Yeah. I don't think we received hard copies, but.
Oh. Tracy, I gave them all to Tracy.
Okay.
She's got one.
Well,
Marion was the lucky recipient.
Okay, well, that's fine. We'll get them. Thank you.
Well, if you have further questions after I present and you've looked through the audit report, just feel free to reach out to our office and we can do that for you, okay?
Okay.
All right, well, good afternoon, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Jennifer Decker, as Wes said, and I am with the firm Hogan Hansen, and I want to first thank you for allowing us to continue doing your audit each year. I'd also like to thank Wes and his staff and the rest of the city staff for their assistance in completing our audit. Hogan Hansen issued an unmodified opinion for the year ended June 30, 2016, and overall the city is in financially good condition. I'll share a few highlights from the 2016 audit, as I'm only allotted until 4:15. And the audit presents the financial statements of the city on the accrual basis of accounting, which is different than the cash basis of accounting, which is used by the city throughout the year. So we make several adjustments to the city's records so that they can be in accordance with the format you see in front of you. The city's total governmental fund balances, which includes the general fund, debt service fund, capital projects fund, and special revenue funds, increased by approximately $3.5 million for the year under audit. There were no GO bonds issued, and $3.7 million were repaid of the outstanding debt. As of June 30, 2016, the general fund, which is your chief operating fund of the city, had a fund balance of $11.4 million compared to total expenditures of the general fund for the year ended June 30, 2016, which were approximately $17.1 million. The city's total business type activity net assets increased approximately $1.2 million, and the city's business type activities include the sewer rental, sewer rent replacement, city communication and utility, solid waste replacement, urban forest utility, and stormwater management funds. The city's financial statements also include data of their component units: the Marion Water Department, Friends of the Marion Library and their foundation, Marion Parks and Recreation Foundation, as well as the Marion Firefighters Association. Even though those entities are legally separate, since the city is financially accountable for them, they are included in your financial statements. As if we did not include them, your statements would be misleading to the public. During the year ended June 30, 2016, the city expended approximately $782,000 under grants which were funded under federal sources, and because that exceeded the $750,000 limit, we got to perform additional procedures under our uniform guidance standards. And when you look at your report, the report over those disbursements are in the back on pages 77 through 79. And the only thing that was interesting is there was a finding, and that was because of segregation of duties. So, okay, there you go. We're also required to report internal control deficiencies we note during our audit. We noted 3 material weaknesses in regards to segregation of duties, the financial statement preparation, and asset capitalization. Both the segregation of duties and financial statement preparation comments are the same as they were in the prior years. The asset capitalization finding was also noted in a prior year, And the engineering and finance departments have been making strides to improve on that area, and we're hoping in the next year or two we'll get that finding off of paper. We also noted 2 significant deficiencies related to collected rates of utilities, which you've already made strides to correct those, as they were in violation of Section 388.6 of the Code of Iowa, and another deficiency related to road use tax being spent in a way that didn't line up with Section 312.6 of the Code of Iowa. So just things that we noted in our audit. Finally, we also are required to summarize other findings related to statutory reporting. These are located on pages 82 to 84 of the report. And they're the list of things you did not do, which is good. So your disbursements did not exceed the budget. No disbursements were noted for travel expenses. There were no business transactions noted between the city and city officials or employees. You had proper insurance coverage. No transactions were found that we believe should have been approved in the council minutes, but were not. So the list goes on and on and on there. There was a note on the TIF report that it's not filed in accordance with the chapter 403.19, but the way it's being filed is the way Lynn County wants it filed. So you decide if that's worth changing or not. And then the urban renewal report, that was filed on time. However, we noted that ending cash did not reconcile to that per the accounting records. So it's a timing issue, and it's a finding that's in there. And then there was one deficit fund balance in the TIF fund, and we just note that you need to monitor that fund for getting it into to eliminate the deficit. And then if there's anyone interested in reviewing a copy of the audit, it's not only on the finance department's website, on the city's website. You can also get that from the Iowa State Auditor's website. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them at this time.
Questions? Thank you. Questions?
I had, you talk about on page 78, it says the report on internal about over compliance, control over compliance.
Over compliance, yes.
I mean, the way it talks is that we're deficit in doing some of that things, and I know the chart on the next page says internal control over financial reporting. Are all those, is that worse or better or the same or what?
As I said, the segregation of duties finding, the financial statement preparation finding, and the asset capitalization finding are all findings that you've had in the past and will continue to have at this point. The asset capitalization policy could potentially go away in the future, but you're probably stuck forever with a segregation of duties finding because you don't have the staff to properly segregate all of those functions. Now, there are mitigating things that are done so you don't have to worry about sleeping at night, but we have to put that in there because our lawyers say we have to put that in there, okay? And the financial statement preparation finding is because your city staff does not write all of the financial statements. You rely on your audit firm to do that, and then you review those. That's what that finding is for.
Okay, so it's not a mark against the city?
No, not at all, not at all.
Okay, well, the way the first paragraph read.
Oh, I understand what you're reading.
When I read that the other night, I'm like, whoa.
That's what the Governmental Accounting Standards Board says we have to put in our opinion. So that's all any city in Iowa has the same opinion.
That's what I wanted to hear. Other cities in Iowa have the same
Yes.
same problem then.
There are problems at all the cities. However, they're not huge problems. They're problems that you have ways of fixing, but we have to, in order to make our do our due diligence, we have to put those couple paragraphs in your report.
So what this means is Wes's staff does a lot with very little.
They do do
Oh, I see the cheering section back here.
Yeah, if we were to hire, another 6 or 8 people, we could maybe get rid of that comment, but just with a very limited staff, and then you got vacations and time off, it's just almost impossible to not do something, compromising.
Yeah.
But we do the best we can.
Well, I know I've looked at these in the past, but I've never seen this, it stated like this before, I don't
Okay.
believe.
Okay.
That it states it negatively.
Well, I can't change the wording.
Well, you know,
It's not meant to be negative. It's just
Okay.
pointing out the issues that we noted. And that's solely the purpose of an audit, is we just tell you all the bad things you did. We don't tell you all the good things you do.
Okay, all right.
So
Well, thank you.
that's for Medco to do. They'll tell you all the good things you do.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
You're welcome.
And, you know, these guys do a great job
Sure they do.
of taking care of everything. So,
And really, for a city this size to only have, 3 material weaknesses, of which 2 you're going to have anyway, and 2 significant deficiencies, is not a lot. You can look at other cities in Iowa, and there are pages and pages and pages and pages of findings. And the small cities, which you wouldn't think would have as many problems, yeah, no, those are just a nightmare.
okay. All right, well, thank you.
I sleep at night, I'll tell you that.
Other questions?
No, I just wanted to say, I do think that is, my opinion, this is fairly clean report.
It is,
It really
very
is. I don't see any issues here. And this is typical stuff like segregation duties. That's what I would expect to see that here. It's not a surprise, and nothing here, concerns me whatsoever. This is, in my opinion, very clean, very, so Wes, you guys do a great job, and I just want to say, this is nothing here is concerning to me whatsoever, so.
It's good to have that from the expert.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, Dave's pretty cool, so.
Experts.
so.
Okay,
All right.
any other questions?
All right, well, thank you so much. And if you do come across something when you're reviewing this, when you need to sleep or something, again, feel free to call my office, and I will help you through anything.
Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
We ready, Chief?
Yes, Your Honor. We discussed this actually Saturday about the purchase of the aerial, how we're going to do this. Pierce offered us considerable savings, $70,000 if we pay 90% up front. So that's what we are asking the council to approve, that we do that. That's pretty much it. After what we discussed Saturday, we were going to take the funds from the reserve funds.
Equipment replacement.
Yeah, equipment replacement, and then pay it back with the lost monies.
Okay.
So,
Everybody
That's the
understand
fund that normally would pay for a portion of the purchase anyway. So in this case, without the local option sales tax, what you normally do would be accumulate some money in the equipment replacement fund, use that for part of your payment, and then bond for the rest. In this case, the local option sales tax will repay the equipment replacement fund for all but about $140,000 on the purchase. Now that we've still got to outfit the truck. There's still some other things that will have to be done, but as we did with the purchase of the pumper trucks, we get a pretty significant discount for making a bigger down payment.
Will that leave some money in your equipment usage fund then for some
yes, it
other
will.
things?
Yes, it will. We
Good.
didn't go over what the limit was, so.
Right.
Yes.
Now spend up to that penny.
That's
Leave
right.
a penny in there.
I made them do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
That makes sense to everybody? All right, thank you. Mr. Carolyn?
Yes, Your Honor. Just one item under Parks on the agenda for this week. It's approving the purchase of a brush chipper for the Urban Forestry Division. As we build out that new division under Parks, there's a need for equipment to support those tree maintenance activities. The department received 5 bids from 4 bidders for this piece of equipment. This is a FY17 budgeted item at $50,000. The low bidder for all equipment as specified was Midwest Underground Supply in the amount of $41,215. And it would be our recommendation that the council would consider that bid from the low bidder for all equipment as specified.
Any questions on that one?
Is that one? Does that have any commonality with the current chopper you have, or is it a different brand? Or?
Well, currently we use one of Public Services units that they have. Very similar to the 2 units they have. We our first chipper that we ever had with the Public Service Department was a Mobark chipper, and then the next 2 units past that are very similar. Feed,
Not the same
Ryan, I
version.
don't remember is the Vermeer a 15-inch feed or is that a 12? A 15. This is a 12 though on this, which will accommodate the needs for our trimming. The other unit at Public Service is a 12 also, correct?
Okay.
Okay. Engineering? Mike?
The first item that started is item number 2. It is a contract with Schnurr Bonifazi for the next section of Tower Terrace. So this portion of Tower Terrace is the portion that's built today, and this is Winslow that is built today. It's our bridge that we need to build yet, and so this is building this portion of Tower Terrace, and then the realignment of Indian Creek. And then the developer then is going to develop this area here. So Schnurr Bonifazi is doing the contract already to design the rest of the project. So because they're already there doing the work, and we're going to do an MOA with the developer, it made sense to go ahead and use the same engineer since they're doing the rest of the design of the work. That way we get a better price, so you don't have 2 engineering firms out there doing work and then trying to have to work together and possibly having conflicts. So we're recommending approval of the contract an amount not to exceed $60,500. I believe that was, it's about 9% of the estimate, so they're estimating that our portion of it would be $660,000 to build that portion of the project. So that's within normal. I mean, typically you pay 12 to 15, so we're getting a little bit of a break there. So. Any questions on that one?
Nope.
Okay. Item number 3 is the project calendar for the 2017 curb ramp project. This is one of our unfunded mandates that we have to do. So this is taking existing ramps that may not even have a curb drop on them. It just might be a full curb, and then you have to step down, and making them so they're wheelchair ADA accessible. What we have to do is we typically do ones that are near the HMA project that we did the previous year, because we'll just mill and overlay the existing HMA. We don't mess around with the curbs as part of that project, and then we'll come back afterwards and retrofit the curbs. If we do not do this project, there's a chance that the state of Iowa will take away our road use funds. So this is a mandate that we have to do. I know Cedar Rapids got audited a couple years ago, and they have to bring a lot of their ramps up to date. And so they actually have an architect that's out there making sure as an independent assurance that they're to compliance.
Is there a timeline you're supposed to have all these done by?
We have an ADA transition plan. I didn't bring it, maybe I have a copy of it, but it's several years. The problem with ADA is currently we use PROAG, which is the proposed right-of-way accessibility guidelines. And with that, between the partially blind and the wheelchair, you can't get them to agree, because with the domes that we put in, the wheelchairs don't like them because if they rock over them, it hurts. But the partially blind want it so that it gives them indication that they're leaving the safety of the sidewalk and entering the street. So they haven't found a happy medium. This is what we currently do. At one time, they did it where you basically took a rake and you raked into the concrete so that just the grooves were there. There was a period of time when you just poured the ramp red, but if you're blind, you can't see color. So it's continually changing, and even with what Cedar Rapids did with their ramps, they found that some of the things that the state of Iowa is requiring doesn't meet the Department of Justice. I actually went to some of my continuing education and found that different states are even interpreting the Department of Justice differently than we are. So it's a constantly moving target. So I don't know that we will ever have 100% compliance, because by the time we get things to date, the rules will change on us.
So, so that we don't risk that funding, we just got to show progress to
Right, so
rectifying
that's, we used to have a much smaller budget. Now I think it's 95,000. And so we just do as many ramps as we can, and then it slowly actually, we add like 5,000 every
Yeah.
couple of years to it, just to show we're continuing to make changes. Now, if we do a street reconstruction project, we're actually pouring concrete. We go ahead and, if we're adding sidewalk or putting sidewalk, we'll make them compliant. But when you're just putting an HMA base
Right.
down, it's hard to do the ramps.
Yeah.
Public service and parks have also done them in areas where they need to as well. So it's not just this program, but we just have to show progress. So we actually have a book that shows every ramp in the city, and as we're making progress.
Okay.
So are any of these that's shown, is that some we've just done recently?
No. So what we do is we actually, in our list, we have some that have been reported as dangerous or not compliant at all. So we don't take the ones that we built maybe 10 years ago that were compliant then and make them compliant now. We try and pick the worst ones out of it and do that. But you also have to keep in mind that it doesn't make fiscally sense to do one at this intersection, one at this intersection. If you're going to do it the intersection, you might as well do the entire intersection. Otherwise, your price goes up.
I know a few years ago they were after us to redo some we had just done because of the rule change. So that.
Yeah, so I mean, some of these might have been compliant 20 years ago, but that's why we try and pick the ones that are least or dangerous. But yeah, you're always going to have that issue, because again, we're designing things off of a proposed guideline. It's not even a real guideline yet, because they can't get agreement.
Okay.
All right, the next one is F4, and this is the approval of the Venstra Kim contract. So, little refresher. Indian Creek Trunk Sewer. So we just got done doing segment 2 in 3 phases. That's down in Cedar Rapids. And then June 13th of 2016, we did the 28E agreement so that we could do segment 7 and 11, which are within the city of Marion. So segment 7 is highlighted there. So that's the segment we're going to build next. And then after that's completed, whether we do that in 1 or 2 phases, then we'll go to segment 11. So those are both within the city of Marion. I know it seems odd that we're not just starting at the bottom and working their way up, but what they did is they actually did a hydraulic model and looked at, where are the biggest constriction in the pipeline. And so we're doing it based on that priority analysis of the hydraulic grade line. So this contract, what we did is we actually went out for proposals of qualification, and we got 7 of them back from Stanley, HDR, Venstra Kim, Fergram, HRG, Schneider & Associates, and Foth. And between us, the city of Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, Robbins, we decided that V&K had the best proposal. And so then what we do is, last week I actually walked it with public service, and we walked the existing line to kind of determine wetlands that were out there. Unfortunately, it is all wetlands like the national inventory states. And so their price is $315,000, not to exceed. To give you an idea, segment 2, phase 3 that Cedar Rapids just did, the design fee for that was $324,000, which was about 9% of the estimate. The engineer's estimate, the last one that was done In 2016 dollars had an estimate of 4.2 million, so that puts this 315 at about 7.6% of estimated construction costs. So it's in line with what it should be.
Questions on that one?
So basically with the 28E that you guys already approved, the city of Marion will be the sponsor of the program. So right now for segment 2, Cedar Rapids was. And so they took care of all the inspection and everything. With this phase, we will take care of that, and then they'll actually reimburse us 3% for our inspection and administration costs to help pay for my salary and the inspector's salary that's going to be managing the project. All right, item 5. This is only a receive and file. So we're just south of Lyle Park. This is Williams, and this is North 10th. Where the red dot is, this property owner is proposing to do a land split. So they have an existing house on the north side of their property. They want to split the property and build another house on that property. This land was recently annexed in and doesn't have sanitary sewer. The sanitary sewer that's the closest is actually over here. But we also did do that study, and this was brought not too long ago. This is Shady Oaks. So we had a similar letter for 4010. This is the property that we're talking about today. So at that time, we didn't want to pay to put the infrastructure in. There was only about 2 properties that actually had interest in their septic failing. This is one of those things that Lon talked about where residential does not pay for itself, especially when we annex it in. So we'd have to tear out the streets, install the sanitary, the water, storm sewer. And so for this one house, what they're basically asking is that they use a septic system instead of us providing sanitary to that lot. You're probably talking a couple $100,000 just to get to that one lot. The public health department with Lynn County is agreeable to let them have another septic system for the new house that's going in there. So it's just a receive and file, but that's kind of the staff report at the same time. So that's what our recommendation would be, is to actually allow them to put the septic system in rather than run the sanitary sewer that's not budgeted at this time.
Do they understand about that if something goes wrong with the septic tank that they would have to hook in? Or
well, if you're building a brand new septic tank, you would hope it wouldn't go bad that quickly.
Well, one would hope.
But yeah, I mean, that's always an issue. And just like the 4010, I think that was an instance where the septic actually did go bad, and Lynn County allowed them to fix it rather than us providing sewer to them,
Okay.
just because it was such
Just
an
so they
expense.
know ahead of time, so they don't come in, why didn't you tell us?
Yep. And there is water on North 10th Street, so they'll be able to tie into water so they won't have a well. So there was some stuff in that letter that was the receive and file. So. So, any questions? So I won't do a staff report unless you guys want to, because that's basically going to be the staff report, our recommendation, just to let them put the septic in, unless you guys want to spend the money to run sanitary sewer for one lot.
Don't think so.
Okay,
Just a question for Mike. Has anybody else looked at that letter? Has planning looked at it?
I know Dave has. Yeah. There are some conditions in there. I'll show it to you when I come over.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, appreciate it.
thank you, Mike. Planning?
The first item started in planning is related to Water Rock LLC, and it's a rezoning for the property out on the corner of 13 and 151, and it's from general commercial to planned development special. The packet was quite lengthy, and the press has covered some of this, I believe, but what's ultimately being proposed out here is a rezoning to provide the opportunity for a complete redevelopment of what's been previously known as the driving range at the intersection. Just to highlight a couple parts of this, it's currently zoned commercial, general commercial, which is C3. Because of the type of development that we're doing, where there's multiple buildings, multiple public access easements necessary, but we would not accept any of these as public streets. When you go to a planned development, you can kind of address a whole number of concerns that make the property easier to develop and also easier to regulate. Signage is a particular concern as you relate to a large-scale development when you try to apply each individual lot or sign code to each individual lot. So with a planned development, we have an understanding of the buildings that are being proposed, the uses within the area that are proposed. You will see there's a preliminary site development plan, and ultimately there'll be a preliminary plat that'll specifically outline where the roads go, internal drives, where the public access easements are, sewer and water, and all the public facilities. But from a zoning perspective, moving to a planned development when you got a multi-tenant, multi-building type site like this, it's much easier to regulate. So what's ultimately being proposed is the PDS district. There's going to be a separate ordinance that will be adopted that will regulate uses and be specific to parcels within the site development plan. As you can see, the gray boxes on here are the buildings. This would be the current intersection of Cherokee Drive and 151, and then up here is Hennessy Parkway. I think the old driving range place is right about here, maybe a little bit lower. I can't recall right offhand. You can see there's an internal access drive being proposed off the two streets that currently exist. The buildings are the gray boxes, and there'll be individual parcels within the planned development. What's really being targeted as uses, this would be a hotel. This is being targeted as a convention center. And then up in this area, these two buildings can either be used for multifamily residential or extended stay hotels in the future. This will probably be a little bit later as the property develops. The front area would be commercial retail pad sites, and the idea is that they'd be commercial retail and restaurant as well, and they're looking at like 50% restaurant possibilities, so which would be a big deal to the city of Marion. So the project's been really moving forward. We'll provide, right now we're just setting the date for the public hearing, which would be proposed on February 9th. There's quite a thick manual, a design manual that was put together as a part of this project that talks about aesthetics, signage, and the different aspects of the project in much greater detail than we've generally ever seen. So we're pretty confident in how this project will come forward. Shive Hattery is involved in the design aspect of it, and they've talked about everything from signage, sizes, to exterior materials, exactly what we've kind of been looking for as an end product for redevelopment. So I think this is going to be a real Class A project for the city, and excited about bringing it forward. So like I said, there's a public hearing going to be set on Thursday for February 9th, so you'll have some time to look through this information. And then we'll also, at that same time, also have a public hearing on the site development plan, which is essentially this document here. So are there any questions on that? There'll be more information. We'll provide additional presentations. I know that Shive Hattery will probably come the Tuesday before and provide a very detailed presentation to the council on what their vision for this is. This is just setting the public hearing. So,
questions?
Yeah, do you know, so you said like the proposed residential area would be the last phase. Do you know what the first, like the hotel area be first? Would it be commercial along?
At this point, I don't know what
okay.
their takedown. Excuse me. I have a feeling this will be the first part of this.
And then is there talk of what to do with like speed limit on the roads, the 151 and 13?
That's all
signals?
part of this project, and part of the platting and the development side will be that they need to provide us with a traffic study.
Okay.
When that comes through, any recommendations out of that would be forwarded on to jurisdictions, including the Department of Transportation, which of course we've tried, as council's tried, and we've kind of pushed the envelope on our ask on trying to get that speed limit lowered, which would be ideal. Hopefully something out of the traffic study can make some recommendations to that. I don't know if they'll necessarily get to speed limits, but I know they'll be addressing access and controlled access, as in lights.
We actually have a meeting set up with the DOT either next week or the following week that actually addresses the speed limit, access issues, and the speed limit on 13 and where that's going to transition. So that will be coming.
Good.
So, Tom, you talked about the design standards. Are we doing them as we go, or do we have something to show to them before they?
They've actually submitted to us what they're proposing.
Okay.
And we've been they meet any standard we would have put on them on their own.
Okay.
So yeah, it's their design aesthetic is going to go fit nicely with our corridor overlay standards. Our corridor overlay standards don't extend east of 13, but what they're proposing certainly does.
I just wonder, as far as making the comprehensive plan update, is that something, what they're doing, is that something we would add to it, you think, or?
No, well, what they're doing is consistent with the city's comp plan. The zoning and the land use have always specified this area for commercial. The specific details would be more in line with what we'd want to see come out of a zoning code requirement.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And when we go to the PDS, it provides us the opportunity to ask the questions or make the statements as to what we want to see as a part of that. And honestly, in working with them, we've worked through all the issues, and we're pretty confident that what they're proposing is going to be a nice aesthetic. And we'll get you that document between now and the next meeting. It's just we're just setting the date for the hearing at this point, so we wanted to get you as much of the information, but the detailed one we can bring, and I know Shive wants to provide some of that as well.
No, I love a plan.
I'm sorry?
I said I love a plan.
There you go. This has probably been one of the best submitted private plan development projects we've had, so it's pretty exciting.
Thanks.
Yep. The next item is just setting the date for the public hearing regarding request to vacate and sell portions of property along 7th Avenue and then between 7th and 8th on 26th Street. And this is related to the platting and associated development with the roundabout at the old Marion Iron site. And what we're doing is really, there was the development agreement with regard to Genesis and what we would get as a part of that project and what they would get as a part of the project. We're trying to get all the pieces assembled, the parcels created. If you recall, I brought forward a number of plata surveys in the fall, and I know we're still waiting on some abstracting and some detailed information to come through on both sides, both from Genesis and from the city. And what we'd like to do is get them all kind of ready for a final closing, and then we can kind of do a big project where, and I don't even think it's going to be council involvement, but just where we do some transfers of properties. But we're trying to get the approvals in line to do that. I don't have the map here, but with the roundabout being created, there are a number of parcels that get created that some of them will come back to the city because they're in private hands. Some of the city land will go to the private hands because they're no longer needed for road right-of-way. As an example, the parcel highlighted in red is currently 7th Avenue. Well, with the roundabout construction, this road here, this is currently what's open, and this is going to be removed. This will ultimately go to Genesis for redevelopment. In return, we're obviously going to get the roundabout property, which is currently in the mix of being transferred. 26th Street here between 7th and 8th is also proposed to be, was proposed and is agreed to by the city in their development agreement that this would be presented to Genesis upon approval of the project. So we need to vacate and sell that, and this is the public hearing process to do so. Whenever we have a public, or whenever we sell public property, we got to have a public hearing. So these two pieces are what's being discussed tonight. As you can see, there's some light blue areas. It's probably hard to see in your packet. These will be the private areas retained by the developer, and then the roundabout area will be then dedicated to the city with a final plat or an acquisition plat here soon, hopefully. There's other parcels along the right-of-way that we currently own that'll be also in the future provided to the developer for redevelopment. So there's a lot of land swaps going on. I've explained this in the past, I think October, November, but I just wanted to remind the council of those things that are coming through, and this is just another piece to that big puzzle. Does that make sense? I know I went over a lot of stuff there. Are there questions?
This brings, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This brings up something I asked Mike a while back, and that's the west side of the roundabout where it comes out onto 7th Avenue again. Right up there. That corner is very tight, and there's all kinds of, the bottom one, that one where it's going east.
Right here?
Yeah, that corner is very tight, and you said that was going to be expanded, I thought.
Yeah, so I might have to come up there, but basically the east end of that island is completed, but the west portion of that island is not done yet. We're going to have to do, in the spring, we're going to have to actually do a portion of that project yet. So you can see all the traffic cones are still up there, and that's part of it is because we had the traffic shifted. Mm-hmm. They're taking that corner tighter than they normally would because we're taking up some space. Because
there's all kind of tire tracks over the concrete.
So we'll get that cleaned out, but part of that, you have that at a lot of intersections with big semis, but by forcing them back over and giving them the full lanes, that shouldn't be as much of an issue. But right now, because we don't have the project done because we ran out of good weather.
But and the reason I bring this up is that the light blue looks like it's right up. That doesn't give you any room to make that thing any bit larger. That's why I bring it up.
There is room between the back of curb and the sidewalk because there's sidewalk that goes in there as well. So there is a grass space that's in there if we truly need to do that. But when we design roundabouts, we actually use a program that actually tracks the vehicles. And so we use I believe we used a 53-foot semi in that case and made sure that it could manage just fine.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't want us to give away land or get rid of land that, we might need to make that corner.
Yep. A lot of it, too, is they need to slow down a little bit.
Well, it's a racetrack, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or a G. You measure your G. You measure your G forces on your car.
Yep. And there's still some confusion there with the left hand must turn left, and so there's people merging from 2 lanes into 1 lane entering the roundabout there. So there's still some confusion until we get that island built. A lot of the paint that we put down with our sand and our snow removal operations, because we actually had to plow snow off of the street before we could paint. Mm-hmm. So it snowed on a Sunday, and Monday we were out there painting because it was going to be the last warm day of the season. So it didn't have a lot of time to stick before we opened it up. So in the spring, we're likely going to have to repaint everything and get it open.
I just wanted to make sure we didn't do something with this that inhibited you from making that corner correct.
Yeah, it's just The hard part is we're shifting the semis farther south than they would generally be shifted because of the cones, the leave room
Okay.
out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Don.
I have a question.
ahead.
You mentioned about making this city land available to the developer. Now, is that going to be a purchase? Or, I mean, this public-private thing really has me kind of confused because there's so much of this stuff which just kind of looks like it's, well, okay, we're going to give you this land, but we're going to pay you to put this in. Now, wait a minute. This doesn't compute for me.
As a part of the development agreement that was entered into between the city and Genesis, and this goes back quite some time, there were parcels, and this is consistent with that agreement, that were agreed to as part of what Genesis would get and what the city would get. And this is consistent with the agreement the city entered into.
But then they will purchase the land that...
No, it's part of the agreement. There was land swaps, and there was a number of things included in that agreement, which I don't have in front of me.
Do you see what I'm saying? That, you know, it just doesn't seem right that we're giving them land and then paying them to put this stuff in. That's what I'm saying.
If I could provide some clarification, when we started working with looking at the acquisition of Marion Iron, which was the piece that we were going to, or the relocation of Marion Iron, that was the piece that we were going to need to put that roundabout in. The acquisition and relocation numbers for the appraisal of the property and their relocation came in at $3.6 million. Rather than us proceeding and doing a straight out acquisition and then having to work with the company on all the relocation, we entered into a development agreement with Genesis. They actually built a new site for Marion Iron. They handled all of the relocation of the company, and then as part of that, we reconfigured these properties. So it's not that we're paying them for property. We're doing a land swap. We're getting the right-of-way that we needed, and they're taking the remnant parcels to put them back into production because they have the property around it. So the total cost to the city for the relocation of the business was the same as it would have been if we had done a straight acquisition. But if you recall, one of the big concerns that Marion Iron had with them being there as long as they were is that if we came in and just bought it, they didn't have a place to go, and the capital gains that they were going to get hit with for a tax bill on that property would have exceeded $1 million. By doing it this way, they were actually able to do a land exchange, and they didn't have that tax liability when they moved to the new location. It was one of the only things that actually made it feasible for Marion Iron to move and actually then continue in the city as a viable business. So all of these pieces were wrapped up together in that master development agreement to facilitate the relocation of the company, have us end up with the property that we needed, but then also dispose of the remnant parcels with the adjoining property owner.
Still doesn't compute. Sorry.
I have one more. So with vacating the road, when are we talking that happening? Because right now everything, the left lane, turn left only onto that road. Maybe it's an engineering question. What's going to happen when that is vacated with the left lane going east on 7th Ave? Does that
Well,
make sense?
even with the vacation and the, like, we're just holding the public hearing
Right.
at this point, and it's not until February 9th.
Right,
So we're just
right,
setting the date for the public hearing. What we'll do is ensure that there's a public access easement granted for any portions of these properties that still need to be used for public access. And then when the project's complete and a redevelopment plan's in place is when you'll kind of see the end result. So the concept is that we'll work with the developer on the 26th Street portion. When they redevelop that property, 26th Street will probably go away.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be private development, and then we'll address all the issues that are associated with that redevelopment at the time. Until such time we do the sale and the actual transaction, the road would remain open with public access easement across it. So the concept is to get the properties all in a position to where they can be exchanged, so that we don't have to all these steps kind of holding off different sales and acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
So.
There's also a utility easement that we're putting over the 26th Street, because there's utilities that we put underground, franchise utilities that are in there as well. So maybe in the future, 26 becomes the entrance into the development of what they put in there. And so then that left-hand turn would be the left-hand turn into that development.
Into it.
But until they put together their site plan, we don't know what's going to happen there.
I guess my question was that it's going to stay open until it's not needed anymore.
Yep.
Right, okay.
Yep.
Just making sure.
Yeah. No, it's
And
a
if-
good question. This is a very confusing and complicated transaction that we've been working on and will continue to work on. So I fully understand the questions. So
An example would be, let's say 26 does go away and we don't need that left turn bay, maybe the island gets extended and that one lane is extended farther to the west to wherever the entrance is, or to 25th or something. So there's
So it could
lots of
just
things
be
that happen.
everybody merge into
Yep.
the right lane instead of
Yeah, they're just
Take a
merging
turn.
sooner than they are now.
yeah.
When they
we're
merge.
supposed to be.
Yeah,
merging, right?
when they're supposed to be merging.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? Number 7, I don't believe was starred, but I think Kesha was going to talk a little bit about that. And then there's a couple new items related to annexation that I think she'll also cover with the council.
Good afternoon. I have on the agenda, setting a public hearing for February 9th regarding an amendment to the Master Trails Plan map. And this is something that VPAC discussed a number of months ago, and what better time than February to amend your Master Trails Plan. And so this is the map. This is the map, page 62, 61 of the Master Trails Plan that highlights all the routes that are proposed in Marion. And so what this shows is side paths, so like the large sidewalks. This shows bike lanes. This shows sharrows where it's painting right in the street, or bike boulevards. And this also shows the standalone multi-use paths like you have with the proposed Seymour Trail, the proposed Indian Creek Trail. So this was done in 2014 as a means to kind of spell out how we plan to build our network. This helps us with grant getting. This helps us with planning for future developments. So when a developer comes in, we can look at this map and say, this is how we would like to see this road developed or redeveloped. Do we want side paths along it? Do we want bike lanes along it? And so what we realized when we were looking at some of our corridors over the last couple of years is maybe we were falling short on what we were wanting for our, especially our major arterials, our minor arterials, and our collectors. We're already building to the standard up if you go along 35th Street up here, or 35th Avenue. So you've got the water tower, the water tower up here. So you've got 35th Street and 35th Avenue. Going along there, the development as that's been expanding has been including side paths, but we're also including bike lanes in that. Well, what we realized is we're developing to a standard that we're not already adopting. And so what BPAC was proposing is a number of amendments, and I can make copies of the list and give you all of these amendments. So this is what was discussed at BPAC is, so you've got some amendments to Grand Avenue. Some of these are amendments from as simple as changing bike lanes to sharrows, just because there isn't the room within the street width. And so that's something that we can accommodate now. Or Alvernet Road, adding a roadside path, because if you go up to the new development of, I think it's Bedford Heights and Prairie Trail, is that there's already being side paths implemented along that road as a mechanism to get around. Some of these, adding multi-use side path between 50th Street and Eagleview Drive just to make that extension out to the Walmart access drive. Just some of the things that you think, well, yeah, and we realize, how did we miss that before? Sometimes there were side paths added only to like 7th and 10th Avenue, right in front of CVS. Again, some of the side path is already in. It's just putting it on the map. Adding Sharrows in a couple of locations, so 6th Avenue, right as you come through Uptown. Ideally, bikes aren't supposed to be on the side paths through the Uptown area just because of the buildings are put closer to the sidewalks. And then also along Winslow Road. And then bike lanes were recommended to be added to a number of different roads. And a lot of these were in places where we looked at the width of the existing street. And so usually if you have a 33-foot wide street, you have room for 11-foot travel lane, 11-foot travel lane, and then two 5.5-foot bike lanes on both sides. So we looked at the feasibility of where we can do these in existing streets and how are we helping to build our network with adding some of these. And so the full map will come. I will distribute the full map before the public hearing on February 9th. I don't have that done quite at this time, but this is basically the list that you'll see. So I'll provide this list to you, and then also the map where you'll see all of those lines added. And so all of you should have a copy of the Master Trails Plan when you were fortunate enough to become council member. If you don't have that and you would like one, I'd be more than happy to print that out for you and get that for you. If not, it's available on the city's website. Any questions on that?
What was the top one there? The top on that sheet? Not there, all the way to the top of the sheet.
Yeah. Sorry. Taking off Munier Road.
So, well, in general, though, where it says amend, does that mean you're adding sidewalk or something?
In this case, amending didn't necessarily change too much. Amending, so Grand Avenue. So it was changing the bike lanes to Sharrows because it was only 30 to 31 foot wide. So as it exists today, we don't have enough room for bike lanes. And so that's something we could include Sharrows. We looked at the traffic counts, the speeds. Is this, obviously you wouldn't want a Sharrow on a 45-mile-an-hour road or even a 35-mile-an-hour road. But the speeds on Grand Avenue, it's a collector street, so it's still.
Remind me again what a Sharrow is.
Sharrow is just and I'm sure I can look through here and find a perfect picture, but it might take me a moment. The Sharrows are the on-street markings. Okay. Where you have the bike and then usually like a chevron symbol above that, that they're marked in the travel lanes.
Oh, okay.
And so you have a side path that's a large sidewalk, and then you have a bike lane that's in the street as a standalone area. And then the Sharrows put you directly in the travel lane with the vehicles. Okay. And so it's not for everybody. It's always meant, if you feel comfortable using a bike lane only, then use a bike lane. We certainly don't want to force anybody out in the street if they're not comfortable with it. But it's just a reminder that bikes have the right to be in the road as well.
Okay. Thank you.
That's what's on 3rd Street.
3rd Street.
By.
Oh, yeah. The complete street thing.
Novak.
Yeah.
You've probably seen it on the road, yeah.
Senior moment, I didn't know what a Sharrow is. Any other questions then for this?
And I just had one more thing, and one thing that was added to the agenda was number 8, 9, and 10. A couple things that were added to the agenda. And so I turned these into Beth. I've got so basically number 8 is receiving and filing annexation applications from, and I'll point that out here. So we received at the last council meeting, if you recall, I had council direct staff to proceed with the annexation of city-owned properties. So you've got Highway 100 here, and this is 44th Street and 3rd Avenue up here, so like Rachi Construction, and then this is pretty much vacant property. But the areas in green are the properties that the city of Marion has acquired or has had over the years. And so those are the ones that council directed us to proceed with annexation. And so since that time, we've received in an annexation application from remnants of the Hennessy family, and then another Hennessy owner, and then also the DOT. And so I've given those copies of the request to be annexed to Beth, or if anybody wants a copy themselves, I can make copies for you. And so number 8 is just receiving and filing applications for the DOT right-of-way, and then the property in orange and the property in blue. So number 9 is the council directing staff to proceed with a 100% voluntary annexation. Usually you see 80-20s. 100% is a little bit easier to take, a little bit shorter process, not too much. And so everything that you see in this area of red would be annexed in. So the city property, the Hennessy properties, and then the DOT right-of-way. And so that is something, number 9, I actually need to add in, and the city of Marion properties to that. I'll get that wording to Tracy. So it's just to reiterate, we're including this annexation, we're including our own properties as well. And then number 10 is setting the public hearing for February 23rd. It's not the next meeting, but it's the meeting after, to allow us to abide by all of the state requirements for notification deadlines. And so we send out notices to all the Cedar Rapids, Lynn County, the public utilities, a number of other multi-jurisdictional government agencies that we send these to. We never hear feedback, but we still send them to them. And if anybody has any questions on this, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Kesha?
Is that big white section in the middle, is that just road easement?
Yeah, that would be road right-of-way. And so
Right-of-way.
within the legal descriptions,
That huge section there?
this large swath. Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
And likewise, you've got some, the DOT right away is not consistent as well. I think sometimes they left it in the city. If it didn't meet the new alignment, we'll just leave it as is. So that can be something that can always be, as you know, vacated and used for private property again. But usually, something like 44th Street, you usually like to hold on to that until you know the true and full alignment of that road, allowing yourself any leniencies that you'd want to have for access points onto Highway 100.
Isn't there already a house where the red hatched is? Isn't that a home?
Over here, yeah, that's John and Deborah Hennessy. They have requested to annex in, and they have asked about grandfathering, what they can do with the property. So the usual county resident coming into the city questions. We've met with them a number of times.
Yeah. I know they have chickens. I see chickens out on the road sometimes.
And they can continue to have those chickens. Even if it's more than 6, they'd be grandfathered in.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Administration, as they say in the South.
Yeah, the first item that we've got up for consideration for the council is the discussion and presentation on the Marion Airport Layout Plan. This has been one of the big tasks for the Airport Advisory Committee over the last year, was to work with our contract engineer, Anderson Bogert Engineers, and take a look at what makes sense for future physical development of and around the airport, including the city property and potential future runways that could be developed out there as the area grows and becomes more and more of a community asset. So Jane has done the airport layout plan. At the meeting in December, the group was ready to recommend that for approval to the City Council. It's also been submitted to the DOT for review and comment to see if we have any revisions that their staff would suggest before that goes in. But this, once adopted by Council and then filed with the DOT, this becomes the roadmap for future development of the airport. It gets into what sequencing you have for when events should occur. It has a lot of implications for the city, especially as far as areas around the airport that we would potentially need to acquire in the future and or protect, so that we would ensure that development that would be inconsistent with the airport wouldn't occur until we're ready to expand out into those areas. So I've asked Jane to come in and make a presentation to the council, since she's the one who did most of the development work on this and can answer a lot of questions that I can't.
Bear with me here a second.
One thing that Lon asked me to talk about was the north-south runway and reconstructing that. So I thought I would hit on that first since that's a high priority item. And the drawing I have up here is actually the airport property map. And it shows different parcels of land that will need to be acquired in the future. And as far as the north-south runway goes, as you can see here, the existing runway is only approximately 23 feet wide. By minimum state standards, that's not nearly wide enough. Minimum state standards is 50 feet. So the existing runway is actually considered a turf runway. This is something that we talked to the Airport Advisory Committee about. About a year ago, working with the airport management, we talked about rehabbing the existing pavement, and through the last year, we've been talking to the Airport Advisory Committee, and what they wanted to do was completely tear out the existing runway and put in a PC concrete runway that would be 75 feet wide, which would meet future requirements. I know the airport management has said that there are existing pilots with larger airplanes that would currently like to use the airport, and the existing length of the north-south runway is not a problem, but it's actually the width. So what we have proposed for the first stage is to reconstruct the north-south runway with an 8-inch thick PC concrete pavement, 75 feet wide, and the length would still be 3,775 feet long, just like it is today. And another thing that we talked to the Airport Advisory Committee about is the possibility of paving the parallel taxiway next to the north-south runway, which you can see here on the map. It's shown as 35 feet wide, which is already wider than the existing runway, which is 23. And something I'd like to talk to you about is phasing for the project. The first phase we have shown in the development plan is to grade and pave the parallel taxiway and use that as a temporary runway while the actual runway is being reconstructed. So the very first phase of that would be land acquisition, and so that would require that parcels D and E and possibly a little sliver here of K would need to be acquired. And then after that, there's a lot of different phases the project could go into based on the funding available. Typically at a lot of other airports, the runways are phased as far as, the land acquisition will be one project. Grading might possibly be the next project, its own separate project. Paving could also be, its own separate project, or those two could be combined depending on the funding that's available. And then the lighting and marking could also be its own project. So that's just some ideas of how that project could be phased. Any specific questions that you have?
Just to give the council a little bit of context on it, one of the things that the advisory committee members had a lot of discussions about is what should be reflected on the ALP. And if you think about just the framework ALP that was submitted to the DOT for the current round of grant funding, it really focused on that east-west runway as being the primary runway. And I think that's probably the biggest shift between that concept ALP and this one, is that the committee members really felt that the investment for the primary runway should go onto the north-south one, because you already had a significant investment, and the cost of developing it and building it out to its ultimate length would be a lot less than doing that on the east-west runway. And so that was a pretty significant switch in focus. The other thing that this plan shows is really how far could you potentially build it out. So the runways that would be reflected on the document would show them built out to their ultimate lengths. The key number on that north-south runway, well, there's several key numbers, but the first one that they would really want the city to hit would be 4,000 feet long. 4,000 is kind of a magic number to get into a different caliber and different size of aircraft, as far as making sure that everything is appropriate for them to be able to come in and land. And so while it's shown on here as being 3,775 feet long in the existing boundaries, once those pieces were done, then the next step would be to look at land acquisition to allow us to expand it out to 4,000 feet. They use some phrases as far as, like percentage of fleet, that when you make those investments, if you get to a certain length of a runway, how many of the flights out there, the planes that are out there, can actually use your airport. And so that's what they're targeting. If memory serves me correctly, that north-south runway at its ultimate length could be about 5,600 feet long, and the east-west runway was, what, about 5,200 feet, Jane, or was it 54?
5,400.
5,400 feet long. Now, practically, if you get the north-south runway to 5,600 feet, do you ever need the other one to go that long? Ankeny's Airport, for example, is right at 5,500 on one runway and 4,000 on the other. And it's been that way since the mid-90s and certainly hasn't seemed to hurt their business.
To build out that north-south, if I'm looking at this right, that's going over the trail, isn't it?
It does. The map shows the maximum length that you can build it without going past Seacrest Road. It gets you about as close to Highway 151 as you can be and as close to Seacrest Road as you possibly could.
So that's Seacrest, right, at the end of it?
Yeah. There's two
runway-
property owners to the south that would be impacted.
Does the runway itself go almost to Seacrest Road? I'm trying to figure this map out.
At its
It gets
ultimate
dark,
length, it
and
would,
then
yeah.
it's real dark.
Yeah, it does. It's about 200 feet short of Seacrest Road.
And then the widened area is the flight path. Is that what that indicates? Or is that a protected area, or what is that?
These trapezoids, which are kind of like a chopped off triangle, are called the approaches. So those are defined by the FAA Code of Regulations. So those are not, well, they are protected as far as there's a certain height associated with those. In the beginning, when the smaller planes are using it, it would be like a 20-to-1 slope. So as you go out 20 feet, you go up one foot for every 20 feet. Later on, it would be a 34-to-1. So those would be eventually protected by height zoning at some point in time, and that would be the next step of the project, is to get to that.
Well, I'm looking at the east-west to the west. I have a particular interest, selfish interest, on 62nd Street where it widens out there. What is that telling me where that widens out? Is that a flight path, again, that you can't build above 30 feet, or what is that? That would go kind of right over the Linn-Mar bus barn. What is that area there?
Yeah, so this is 62nd Street, and these are these same type of approach zones, so there are height limitations with these zones. Again, it's the 20-to-1 for the initial approach, which is the closer in triangle, and then eventually we're showing a 34-to-1 approach as far as how the height is determined. So anything in those trapezoidal areas has a certain height restriction, and of course the farther you get away from the runway, the higher those get.
I assume the buildings that are there have been measured and found to be legal?
Yes,
we don't have to put a rock on top of all those light up there to...
Yeah, we did do a drone survey of all those buildings, and I can kind of show you a different drawing that shows those. Just a second here. So this is the inner approach for that runway end. And you can see, if you have all the drawings, this would be on sheet number 7. That's the sheet I'm on. So you can see all the points that were identified by the drone survey in that approach. They're all numbered and they're on the table. The object elevation is given, and then that imaginary surface, approach surface elevation is given. And then there's a column for whether they need to be removed or not. And as you can see, the majority of items listed on there are trees. So none of the buildings existing out there, I don't believe any of those penetrated that approach surface that I can see.
Thank you.
When Jeff's landing, you better duck.
Well, I wonder if anyone other than I have talked to Terry Bjornson, who owns the land on the south side of the north-south runway between the trail and Secrest Road.
That's the southern.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry. Which part does he own? Does he own the eastern?
Yeah.
Who owns the stuff to the west or to the east? Sorry. Because it goes into 2 parcels there.
Behind what Bjornson owns?
Yeah. So
to the
Jorgensen
east
owns
of that, I don't
Who
know.
owns east of that?
Is that it? Is that any of that
Pretty
you
ambitious.
Is that yours? Oh. Say that again.
Kemp Farms.
Kemp Farms.
As part of this, one of the things that Anderson Bogert did was hold a meeting out at the airport where they directly invited all the potential impacted property owners to come out and attend and see everything that was going on. It was a very well-attended meeting. I know Jane has followed up individually with several of the folks that had questions out there, and the council should have gotten a copy of the letter that there's going to be another meeting held on February 1st to allow for additional public input.
So is that meeting open to the public then, February 1st?
Yeah, and this time around it's going to be a much more extensive mailing. The ALP really needed to be developed before we could start moving down the path of establishing airport zoning and amending the City of Marion's land use map to reflect the presence of an airport in the city limits, because where these things start and end determines which properties are going to be impacted. And so at the last meeting, the Airport Advisory Committee gave Anderson Bogert some guidance on how far out to reach as far as doing invitations to folks that could potentially be impacted.
Do you have a real quick timetable of what needs to be, what does the city need to be doing first, second, third? Can you outline just real quick what that is?
Yeah, the phasing plan outlines a couple of different things as far as the recommendations for how things should proceed. When they put this together, one of the things that the board was encouraged to do was to borrow a phrase, to plan without limits, to come up with an ideal schedule as if you had all the funding in place and what would make sense. There are some alternatives we'll have to take a look at based on the fiscal realities of what it takes to put a runway in that we might be able to explore with this. For example, Jane was talking about land acquisitions for putting in the parallel taxiway. It may be more economical to do a land lease rather than actually acquire the land to be able to do that. So those are the things that the council, as the ultimate budgetary authority, will really have to get into the details of how do we put together the financing plan, one, that makes the most sense for local dollars, but two, also then maximizes the DOT funding stream that we have available.
So, anyone else have if you widen the existing runway but don't increase the length, can you start landing jets on that?
No.
It's too short?
Yeah, it would still be short for that. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the biggest things they ran into, Joe, and one of the that was interesting to learn about is the carrying capacity, the weight capacity that the runway has. And with the runway that we have, it would be very expensive to increase its carrying capacity to the point that it would be able to land the planes that they're wanting to target. The airport classification that the advisory board is recommending that Marion look at is a C2. And that includes, has implications for how fast the planes can come in and how wide their wingspans are, which influences weight. I believe that's the classification that Ankeny has as a C2 runway.
Yeah. Well, I assume that's why you talked about it being 8 inches thick. That's why, is for the landing, or to hold that extra weight.
That would be for the C2 aircraft, would be the 8-inch concrete.
Right. That's what I thought that you were talking.
Yep.
Make a great drag strip.
No drag racing.
You can run fast cars on that baby and put lights out there. Everybody has a hobby, you know.
Any other questions then for that? Well, thank you very much for showing us that.
Yep.
Thank you, Jane.
Yep.
Number 3, I wanted to brief the council on where we're at with the potential uptown parking purchase. I think I talked with the council a little bit about this in the past, but we've been working on it for quite a while. This would actually be the Allen Vernon's Hoskins building up on the north, would be the southwest corner of 8th Avenue and 12th Street. The proposal initially from the purchasers was to have the city lease that. They would buy the building, finish out any tenant relocations that need to be done, tear it down, remove the construction materials, and then basically provide to us a site that was ready for the installation of a parking lot. In looking at the financial alternatives, they had initially proposed to us that the city would look at leasing it. In working with our financial folks out of Des Moines, the best and least expensive option for us is for us to just go ahead and actually acquire it. And they would recommend that we use a lease certificate to be able to do that. It's essentially about the same thing as issuing a bond, but the key to this is that we would have a repurchase agreement with Marion Holdings, the company that's going to buy it, demolish the buildings. And so anytime within that first 10 years, when we reach the point where we would be finished with the parking lot, they would buy it back from us at the same price that we buy it from them. So they're proposing it at $910,000. If we keep it and use it as parking for 5 years, we're done with 7th Avenue and ready to move forward and allow a building to be built on that site, they buy it back from us for $910,000. The difference between this and the other proposal is that since we'd be getting back our original purchase price, the only thing that we're out during that period of time is the interest that we would end up paying on those lease certificates. And in this case, I ran the numbers on it just to see what it would be like based off of a 5-year schedule at the city's presumed rate of interest, and it comes out to about $46,000. So 5 years for parking for $46,000 for anywhere between 40 and 48 parking places is a pretty inexpensive alternative to provide that many spots. We would have the cost of constructing the parking lot, but my presumption is that we would do that with our in-house labor, and we would just go ahead and construct it using asphalt as a temporary lot, and then when we're ready to tear it out and allow for construction of a building on it, that would be ready to go.
Wouldn't have demo costs, though.
We would not have demolition costs in the building. It would be a bare site ready for the installation of a parking lot.
Now, that's southeast corner.
Southwest.
West corner is across the street, which is the memorial building and all that.
No,
that's 11th Street.
The attorney's office.
12th Street, Mary Lou.
12th Street. Yeah, it'd still be the southeast corner because then the southwest corner.
The southeast is the Methodist Church.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah, so looking at the long-term cost to the city and the benefit to the city, if the council would recall, this is not something that normally we would be all that interested in, but with 6th Avenue winding down and staged really to be completed. We're going to have to start taking a look at scheduling on the 7th Avenue side for improvements over there. When we do 7th Avenue, there's an awful lot of on-street parking that we're going to lose, and there aren't that many opportunities to find properties this close to the uptown where you can acquire it, put in some supplemental parking for a period of time, and then have somebody who's ready to turn around and do a project on it when you're done.
How much longer are those dumpsters going to be on 8th Avenue and 10th Street?
We actually met with Ray Brown at the ESCO group today, so we hope to have that easement agreement tied up for where the dumpsters will permanently go and brought to the council on February 9th. We've already met with all the haulers and have bids from them on providing that service for that block. So once we have the easement, we'll be ready to move on it pretty quick.
Okay, are those private parking signs going to be eliminated, or are they going to still maintain their private parking on public street?
The way that easement agreement works is that they are allowed to use that parking until such time as we could designate parking for them somewhere else. So once this lot would be up and done, we could potentially designate some of those parking places for the Shermco folks, and then those would move over into this lot, making the street parking available.
So the interest that we would get on this that you spoke of, would that be the 2% type interest that we pay in on bonds, or?
The interest rates have gone up a little bit. I think I estimated them at 2.55%, just to try to make sure that we had a little bit of cushion in there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So would that be for the entire, was it 5 years, or?
5 years, I was estimating it to be right about $46,000 if we held it for 5. And a lot of that was really determined on when we would do when we would be done with 7th Avenue and would no longer need the parking.
I guess I didn't ask that right. What I'm saying is, it's not $46,000 a year. It's 46.
No, that's the total.
Total. That's
Yeah.
what I was trying
That's
to
a
get
heck
at.
of a deal.
That's
Yeah.
the total.
Any other questions then on this?
So, no, I guess I just answered my question. They would have the building gone and everything cleared by September 1. Okay.
Yeah, they do have this. The sellers are reviewing it. Those timelines I wasn't exactly sure about because I've never talked to any of the tenants they have, so I don't know when they might be able to move or any of that. So that could potentially change based on where they're able to find spaces for the current occupants, and then how long it takes them to get it torn down.
And then you'd have Ryan or Public Service do the paving then?
I'm sure he'd be pleased to know that I was counting on him to do that. Or we could potentially talk to Mike's crew about doing it and see which one does a better job and make it a competition.
Ooh.
Have them each do half.
Make it a competition.
Yeah.
Half one Parks, half Public Service. Who's better? Yeah. That's a good idea.
I would hope that we'd pave our other city parking lot at the same time.
I agree.
Just to clarify, usually when we do an asphalt project within the parks, Ryan's guys are assisting with those too.
You'd have a flower pot at each parking place, right?
Yeah, one of the things that it does give us the opportunity to do, we've actually been approached by one business about whether or not there would be an interest in consolidating the garbage in that block like we're doing in the other one and having it brought to one centralized location. So that'll be something we can take a look at with the development of the parking lot, is whether or not it makes sense to do that in the other block as well. Any other questions on that?
I don't see any.
Okay.
Number
5, I believe all the council members are aware of this with the correspondence that we received from the ACLU. Don took a look at it and feels that some of their comments probably do have some merit. As the council may remember, the ordinance that they had sent their correspondence about had actually been repealed and replaced with a different ordinance back in November. There's some question about whether or not we went far enough with that particular ordinance, and so we're going to take a look at that. But Devin, who would be doing the research on that, I don't believe is back in the office until this week, so we really couldn't make much progress on it until then. But from the city's standpoint, the original requirement for issuing a permit for that, the finance department had never done that in collective memory from the current city employees, so there really didn't seem to be much reason to continue to have that on the books. So we'll continue to work on that, but I don't think that it's something that's going to be a tremendous liability for the city going forward.
Lon, I was just wondering, like other ordinances, are we looking at those periodically if they need to be changed, or is there any kind of schedule, or just when it comes up?
Generally, it's when things come up. I mean, the League of Cities will do a publication every year, what they call their new laws of interest, and usually if the state has made any changes, we'll pick up things from there that we need to make adjustments to our ordinances. Also, the City Attorneys Association across the state, if there's court cases or anything like that, they'll distribute that out amongst their professional associations, so things might get brought forward that way. Beyond that, we may hear from finance, or we could hear from planning or my department from other ordinance adjustments that need to be made if the environment out there changes. Most of the time that's from a court decision or something along those lines. You know, if you look at in this particular case, the things that they were citing that were obstacles, I fully support what the police department did. If you put somebody out in that median, you're creating a hazard for anybody who's in the crosswalk and the next crosswalk. They're too close together, holding up signs. You're obscuring the view of potential pedestrians from the traveling public. So no matter what ordinance we had on the books, the police department, in my mind, would have been within their rights to ask them to do that because the folks that were out there were creating a hazard. And that's not going to change regardless of what we change with this ordinance.
Well, I think the one point that he was trying to make about that it was stifling spontaneity, I think that's a crock. I mean, if this was a town of 1,500 people, okay, fine, be spontaneous, but no longer.
It's all in the balancing act of someone who is exercising their rights of free speech versus making sure that we're maintaining the city's interests in public safety. And in this case, to me, that was one of those ones that clearly would have crossed the line because you were creating a hazard for other folks who potentially wanted to cross the street. But that's always the balancing act that we have to maintain between the rights of individuals to exercise their free speech and the rights of people to otherwise freely enjoy the same property that they may be choosing to exercise their free speech on because it belongs to the public.
I think this is something we ought to track the cost to see what it costs the city to handle this. Just, anyway, I think we should keep a running track of that.
Okay.
Number 6?
Number 6, the city council, that was addressed to me but also CC'd to the city council, was a request for the city's position on the minimum wage ordinance that was adopted by Lynn County. In the past, when we briefed the council on this, I think Don has a very strongly held opinion that the ordinance exceeds Lynn County's authority. I advised the City Council not to take action on this, and that was for a couple of reasons. One is if you choose to, for example, pass a local ordinance that says, yes, we agree, and opt in, then you're, in my mind, passing a policy or a resolution or an ordinance that says that we agree that Lynn County has a legitimate right to pass that ordinance. That's not something that the city should be doing. In the same vein, if you pass an ordinance or resolution to opt out, again, to me, you're giving tacit approval saying that you think that that was a legal ordinance by Lynn County. So there didn't really seem to be anything to gain by the city on doing that. The other reason I was taking a look at that is because, for example, if the City Council wanted to pass an ordinance to comply and says, yes, we agree, in my mind, that makes us responsible for enforcing it. So if someone brings a case, now all of a sudden they're bringing a case against a City of Marion ordinance, which means we're responsible for enforcing wage and hour laws, which we're not equipped to do. It's not within our normal purview. That's usually a Department of Labor thing, but if you adopt a local ordinance, it becomes a local thing. By staying out of the middle of that, it is a Lynn County issue. So if somebody wants to allege that they're not being paid in compliance with Lynn County's ordinance, it's their job to enforce that. It's not ours to enforce. So for those reasons, I don't recommend that the City Council take a position on this issue. It's other than the sheer act of making a political statement out of it, there doesn't seem to be any potential upside for the community and potentially downside.
But what about his questions? Are we going to, he had the 2 questions. Do we need to get back to him with answers?
That would be up to the City Council. I mean, if you choose not to take action on it, then it would just be as simple as, we've had a discussion on it. And unless you direct me to bring you a motion or something for you to consider, then we'll just send him a note back saying we briefed the council today and the council is elected to not take action on this issue.
But if the state doesn't do anything in this session, then that means it's going to go up next year. I mean, it'll...
Well, at that time, though, we could review where we are on it.
Yeah.
The prevailing opinion is that the state is going to do something about it. At least that's what I've heard from the league so far. If they choose not to act, that raises a couple of interesting questions. If the state doesn't act, does that mean that they're agreeing that counties have the ability to pass that ordinance? If the state is agreeing that counties have the ability to pass that ordinance, which makes it a legal ordinance, then I think it's appropriate for us as a city to act on whether we stay in or stay out.
So the time to act or to express our opinion would be next year.
Would be after the legislature either acts or doesn't act.
Unless we do get sued by ACLU.
Can we hear what Don, did you have something to say, Don?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out where my opinion comes from. After the people of Iowa adopted the Home Rule Amendment to our Constitution, the legislature adopted some statutes to put the Home Rule into force and effect. And the main statute is 364.1. And the significant part of that statute is that it says this grant of home rule powers does not include the exercise or the power to enact private or civil law governing civil relationships, which to me is the employer-employee relationship. You can't get more civil in nature than that, and how much pay an employee is going to have. So I think it's very clear that cities do not have the power to enact minimum wage laws. So I recommend the same thing as Lon said, just don't do anything. I'd say the county dug this hole for themselves, so leave them lay in it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I contacted Ben Rogers today, and that's what he said is, the home rule gives us the authority. So they must think, that they're reading it differently, that they do have the authority.
Yes.
This is the home rule.
There have been opinions issued by other attorneys, and it's hard to believe, but attorneys don't always agree.
The other thing that Don has reminded the council in the past is that what he is giving you as an opinion, you are free to have different ones or to choose to accept it or ignore it. Councils have done both in the past. So,
I have 2 questions. Are we going to, what are we going to do about the artisan sanctuary?
We're going to give you, the council, a listing of all the documentation that we ask for before we would disperse a check on that.
And secondly, what has been decided as far as a cost of living increase for the council?
The council asked me on Saturday to give you some figures on that. Those will be coming out with the next draft of the budget.
Okay.
Yep.
Paul?
Yes, I have 2 items, Your Honor. One is, Wes gave us a list this week of people owing money to the city of Marion that what amounts to quite a little bit of money, $15,000, and if in 30 days they haven't responded, we said we're going to assess the property. And there's two big ones, Masonic Temple and Scott Bezick, each about $5,000. But I noticed two on there from a person I believe is a person that we've heard from lately, and that's a company called Capital Commercial Division. Is that not the company that had the building collapse? Thank you.
Joe, I have two other items I'd like to address.
Oh, sure.
One was not starred, but that's number 9. And that, I've talked with the council about this on Saturday, about the concept that instead of, when we're doing these, anything that has a residential base to it, like senior housing or workforce housing, where there's city participation in it, to do it through the urban revitalization statute rather than doing it through the tax increment financing statute. This would be the first one that we would look to run that way. And then on, it's not on the agenda now, but after the discussion on Saturday, I'd like to add an item for Thursday. That's a motion proceeding or directing staff to proceed with the development of a financing plan for the Marion Library project, so that we can actually start to take some of the concepts that we talked about and put them into a formal proposal so the council could see what the pros and cons of those would be.
Any discussion on that?
No, we need to discuss it.
Proceed then.
Instead of reading about it in the paper.
Very good.
The other item I have, I think,
I'm sorry.
is of great importance. Don't do the. Here, I'll get my gavel up here when we're ready. We have commissions and boards, and many of them are very important. The one that I have looked at of great importance, and I look at it because we have a brand new street out on the north side that's closed up called Tower Terrace Road because we don't have a fence along each side of it. We don't have a fence because we have a board and commission called the Board of Adjustment who does really important things, but I believe, Tom, they didn't have a quorum, and they've had a couple resign. We have a couple applications. But, Lon, I would like to have us, as we did with planning and zoning, put on some alternates on the Board of Adjustment. That's the last chance a lot of times and of great importance. I think the fence is of great importance. We have a brand new road that's done that we can't use. We have lots that could be sold at the end of that. And we have a commission that couldn't get together and vote one way or another in favor or opposed to an 8-foot-high fence. So anyway, I wish, Lon, that you would put together something as we did before adding some alternates to the Board of Adjustment, if the rest of the council so thinks so.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So when they have their meetings, they'll have a quorum. And Tom?
But that is the board that you wanted to have alternates for, unfortunately, and if you know of people that would like to serve on the zoning board, that would be great. It is not what I would consider to be one of the most popular boards or commissions.
Mayor has 2 applicants.
I know he does.
Yeah. And we have one. Have you heard from our one?
I don't think
our chairman who may resign.
Mr. Gibson has indicated to me that he does not plan to sign the ethics
so we're
policy.
too short, and we have 2 applications.
Correct. So those are, I think the mayor's received those, and we're looking, he's meeting with them. So,
is there a way the council could work on that fence and approve something that we could get done between Linmar and the city, whatever we're going to get done, so that developer can develop his land and we can utilize that street?
I would further, I mean, that fence can be built at 6 foot right now. The agreement says that the council request an 8-foot fence. We don't allow 8-foot fences in districts like that.
Can the council do that, is what I'm asking?
You would have to change the city code, which I would definitely not suggest. And in my mind, and this is just the planning director's position, that I don't think an 8-foot fence is warranted there. But the zoning board of adjustment would be the group that would make that variance.
Could we change the code that a fence that divides schools and school districts
It would
can be
take about
8 foot
2
tall?
months.
Take 2 readings, which we could do in 1.
No, it
or
takes
3.
2 months because it's an amendment to the zoning code. So the planning commission have to read it, hold a public hearing, city council public hearing, and 2 readings if you want to waive the third. So I agree. I'd like to see the road open myself. I'm not suggesting that I know what the zoning board's going to do, but I can tell you that in past practice, it has not been 8-foot allowances for fences have not been in their realm of, yeah, that should be no problem. Our zoning board takes those types of things very seriously, and there's going to have to be a specific hardship, and hardship, as Don can tell you, is not something that's, it sounds good, let's just do it. There's certain parameters that exist to require the provision.
There's a difference on private property and school property, I think.
And that may be a question, that's the question for the zoning board of adjustment. But as you also may or may not know, the zoning board of adjustment's ruling is only appealable to the district court. So the council can, let's say they say, no, 8-foot fence, it's going to be 6 foot. There could be an appeal or a request that they review it issued by the school, so it'd come back to the council, and the council could say, yeah, they need to look at it again, then it would go back to the zoning board of adjustment. After that process is done, the only appeal is district court. So there have been many cities, and I'm not suggesting this by any means, but Don can attest that there have been cities where their councils have sued their zoning board of adjustments. So they do hold quite a clout by virtue of position. They're a quasi-judicial board.
What about in the absence of a board of adjustments, which we don't have right now? Could we approve an 8-foot high fence on school property between the 2 areas? We don't have a board of adjustment right now.
Yes, we do.
We do not.
We have a board that has a...
How many would you have in a meeting if you had it tomorrow night?
We don't have a scheduled meeting. Our scheduled meetings, actually, we'd have to set a hearing outside of the normally scheduled meetings. Our meetings are the 3rd Tuesday of the month, and right now we're scheduled for the meeting, and we have 3 board members, and it takes 3 board members to act. So one board member is on medical. He's had surgery. So
we spent untold millions of dollars engineering and building that road. And it sits there with a barricade that you got to drive around, because they did, to get down to the end of it to see what's down there. And we got to.
I don't know that 2 foot on a fence should be stopping a roadway myself, but that's maybe my personal opinion.
It isn't on private property, Tom. It does serve a purpose of keeping the junior high kid from whipping across there and going to home with his brother at the high school.
Isn't there a creek down in there now? So if they did try to cross down, they're going to go through water and mud, and so I don't know if there's even a need for a fence because there's a natural fence with that creek.
Well, the need for the fence is that we can't open the dang road.
I know, but does that go back to the fact that we need to put an 8-foot fence in, or Linmar needs to say, okay, fine, let's open it without this fence in?
I've talked to Linmar. I would think you all should do the same.
I have talked to a few, yes.
And just so you're aware, there were some items that we did not finish on that project because the fence was not installed. So I believe there's some signs and stuff that were not put in because the fence was not put in. So there's not just the fence. There are other items legally that we would have to install before we could open that.
It's a little hard to get down right now.
Well,
Your barricade's pretty wide.
You're not supposed to be driving down it, but yeah.
In the Jeep, it was easy.
Lon, would it be worth staff to put together a plan to get this road open? What would we need to do?
It really comes down to if the ZBA is able to get their meeting together in February and take action on it. If the Board of Adjustment meets and gives the thumbs up or the thumbs down on it, then we move on to the next step. Any of the other alternatives that we look at take just as long or longer than waiting for the Board of Adjustment to make their determination. One of the things, because I have talked with several of the staff at the school about this on the administrative side, is that there's a reluctance there the agreement between the city and the school says that we will go through the process to see if we'd be allowed to put up an 8-foot fence. And the agreement says that there will be a fence, whether it's the 8-foot or the 6-foot, depending on what happens with the ZBA. And so there's a strong concern there on the school side that if they say, no, go ahead and open the road without a fence, and there's yet a contractual document that says that there will be a fence and someone were to get hurt, that they could potentially be assuming some liability by doing that. The one thing I can tell you is that we have staff that have been out there many, many times after the snows and have yet to see one set of footprints going back and forth between those two campuses anywhere outside of the sidewalks. So I don't know that there's that much possibility that something like that could happen, but I think there's some members on the school board that don't want to entertain anything other than zero risk.
Is there a legal way to do it, Don?
Not that I'm aware of. Just zoning board of adjustments, the only one that has legal jurisdiction over that kind of a question.
And so if they vote no on an 8-foot fence, then what
Then
happen?
they should be satisfied with a 6, is my
And then we proceed with the installation of a 6 because that's the only one we can legally install.
Right away, or are we talking?
Depends on availability of fencing contractor and what the weather's like to get it in.
There is some lead time because they haven't ordered the fence because they don't know if there's a 6 or 8-foot fence.
Right.
We also have to get concrete out there. There's a lot of factors.
No, Parks could do that. All right.
We have a contractor that's able and willing, but they need to order the
Get
parts.
Randy to help.
I wanted to say one thing. I was watching the news last night. Well, I heard the news, and our own Dave Hockett was on there. He did a really good job, Tom. I thought he did because I was in the other room when I heard it, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like Dave. And I came back in there, and I got right at the end, so I backed it up and watched. And
I'll let him know. He
I
thought he did well also.
Yeah, I did too. This is talking about senior housing in Marion.
The only thing is, and I don't know if there's any press here, but I think it's so important. The opening statement was that the city of Marion is building senior housing, and that is not the case. The city of Marion is approving the development of senior housing, and there are people that are going to say that the city's doing what, but. So I hope I mean, we all understand that, but I wish someone would pick that up and let everyone know that we don't, just like we don't build the residential streets with the development, we don't build senior housing. So spread the word, I guess.
But he did a good job on it. I thought he did a very good job.
But he did.
Yeah.
He did do a nice job.
Anything,
I'll relay that to him.
Do you have something else?
Just thanks to the council members and the mayor, even though he had to leave, for coming to the meeting at Emerson with the Marion Independent School Board. They held a public meeting over at the school to gather additional public input on the proposal that they received for the redevelopment of the Emerson school site. Pretty well attended. I think there were probably about 40 members of the neighborhood there, so they've been hearing a lot about it. But I think that was one. It's got a potential senior housing component to it as well. So there was some press coverage on that too.
Is there going to be anything as far as a presentation to us on what might?
The school board has yet to take a vote on whether they're ready to proceed with the next phase. It's not a formal proposal, but what the construction company did is ask the city council, or excuse me, the school board, to give them time to put together a more formal proposal. There's a lot of things that they're looking at, like senior housing tax credits, historic preservation tax credits, that do take some time to develop, and I think they need to know if they're going to be eligible for some of that type of stuff to make the project feasible.
So are they going to take that back to the school board again then when they're finished?
Yeah,
with
the school board will act on it. I don't know if that'll be their next meeting or what their calendar is, but I'll find out from the superintendent.
If it's like a senior housing type, would there need to be a zoning change or anything?
That's one of the things that the firm has to take a look at, is whether or not that will be required. I believe it's R2, so I'd have to take a look and see if that type of housing would be allowed in R2 or if a zoning change would be needed.
D2,
They are looking at housing on one level, and then the gym and the lower level would potentially become space for a nonprofit. I know they've had conversations with the Boys and Girls Club, but also with ISU Extension. I think their main concept is that they'd separate the building into two different zones so that you don't have to worry about ADA compliance between the two floors, which is one of the big issues out there.
Was that their only proposal that they got?
It was the only one they received, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. I know there were 3 potential firms that contacted me about it, but this was the only one that put in a proposal.
I just don't want to see them sell it for $1 like they did Longfellow, and then all of a sudden buy it back for how much? You know, just the land. So.
And just a couple of reminders: State of the City on Thursday at the Marriott, 11:45, and then the council pictures at 5 o'clock on Thursday.
Oh man,
got to wear your suit. So, and then
just for the pictures.
Other thing I wanted to mention was the thanks to all the folks on the budget that did the budget, and the good job that y'all did, and the day and a half talk that your vocal cords were tired, I'm sure, by Saturday afternoon. But Luann and Amanda and all the others that were doing that, I appreciate it. With that, we are out of here.